And we're going to continue with the fourth chapter of The Whispering Mountain by Joan Aiken. Erebus watched from a tree as Bilk and Prigman both tried to trick each other on the placement of the harp. She decided to figure out what they had hidden and ran into, and I can't think of his name right now, and they haven't said it in the chapter, but the Ottoman gentleman, who is also in town looking for the harp and has been kind of working with Lord Malin. And they are walking together now, and we'll come back to the beginning of the chapter where we cut off. "You're a native resident, denizen of this charming spot, my dear person?" he was inquiring when there came another interruption. A large black and white bird, which had been hovering in an undecided way high above the quarry, now sighted Erebus and dropped like a plummet on her head, cushioning his landing with a skilful last-minute break action of the wings. "Hey day, lack-a-daisy, my stars!" exclaimed the foreign gentleman. "Madam, I fear you have been assaulted by a songster, one of the feathered tribe. Allow me to assist you." "No danger, sir, I thank you," Erebus answered, laughing. "This is my tame falcon, Hawk." "Ah, indeed, verily, for sure," the man said, his muddy brown eyes studying Hawk with their usual keenness. "How foolish I am! I now observe that he brings you a letter, missive, epistle." "I beg your pardon, sir," Erebus said, very much surprised. What could he mean? But when she pulled on a glove, which she always carried hanging at her belt, and gently dislodged Hawk onto her wrist, she saw that the stranger seemed to be right. Impaled on one of the falcon's long talons was a small piece of paper. "A well-trained fowl, bless me!" the man remarked, trying very hard to see what was written on the paper. Erebus slipped it quickly into her glove, but not before she had had time to read the printed words. "The infallible gluttony of the peacock tends to alienate our attachment from it, while the hearth cream of its voice diminishes the pleasure received from its brilliancy." And again, this is one where S's are represented as F's, so a little bit difficult to get through. A page from Owen's precious little book. But how curious! How had Hawk come by it? And where could Owen be? Excuse me, sir," she muttered hastily. "Leave you I must now, I am afraid. No trouble at all to find the Devil's Leap you will have. Anyone in the town will be telling you. My dada is wanting his breakfast just now, see?" In fact, as she well knew, this last was hardly true. She reached the caravan to find Tom Dando wreathed in paper and streaked with ink, scribbling away at his poem. Verses poured out of him like water from a spring. One or two people were waiting to buy medicine or have their hair cut. Luckily, they seemed in no hurry and kept respectfully silent, sitting in the sun on the steps outside the van. As the sheets of paper piled up higher and higher inside, Erebus glanced in to make sure Owen was not there, which he was not, and then whispered, Down the town I am going, Dada. Back home in time to make your dinner." Her father nodded abstractedly. His right hand with the quill never for a moment stopped its gallop across the paper. Erebus left him and threaded her way through the fair. A number of people were stirring now, fetching water, blowing on the ashes of last night's fire, grilling bacon before entering the town. She made sure that the foreign gentleman was not following her. Just before she reached the first houses, Erebus loosened a long tress of her fine black hair and held it up for the falcon to take in his beak. "Easy now with the pulling, Hawk, my little one," she said. "Remember, hair will come clean out if you will be tugged too hard." Keeping his beak firmly clenched on the strand, Hawk flew slowly off with easy long flaps of his wings, and Erebus followed him at her swiftest pace, sometimes breaking into a run. Right down the cobbled street and through the little town of Nant Agardoo they went. Bakers, butchers, and grocers were still shuttered, and the whisper of Fig Hat Ben up above the rooftops was the only sound to be heard. Midway along stood the new town hall, backed against the cliff, and by it, with pillars and portico, very grand was the entrance to the big cave, a long, high tunnel leading into the mountain. Erebus thought as she sped past that she caught a glimpse of a fat, fur-coated figure standing a short way inside the tunnel. He had his back turned and did not seem to notice her. Hawk, eager to reach his objective, flapped along faster and faster, giving Erebus some terrible tweaks. She could run like a deer, but there was no possible hope of keeping pace with him when he flew at top speed. "Wait you now, you old mule of a bird!" "Osquelich, "Yinda," she panted, "will you be having the scalp off me?" He gave an apologetic croak, "Heck, heck, heck," and slowed down a little, but soon forgot and began going faster again. "Ouch!" Erebus gasped. "I have a stitch on me that could have been made by Cleopatra's needle indeed." But catching Hawk's anxiety, she ran as fast as she could. In little more than 10 minutes they had left the town behind them and entered the stretch of narrower gorge below. "Taking me to those empty houses, are you?" Erebus said, much puzzled. "Are you sure the sense is not clear gone from you, you old gowitch?" But the falcon drew her steadily through, now more slowly. It was plain he disliked the neighborhood, and Erebus could see why, for the whole overhang of cliff above seemed likely to topple down and bury them at any time. "Hi, how!" Erebus muttered. "Men will be fools. I am thinking to build houses in such a place." Tiptoeing near, she looked up and down the deserted row and called out softly, "Owen! Owen, are you by here, boy, or is my old Hebog making a fool of me?" She wondered if Owen could have run away from his grandfather and be sheltering in one of the houses, though she would have expected him to choose a less dangerous refuge. But there was no answer to her call. Then, as she went slowly down the row, a slight movement attracted her attention. She peered through one of the glassless window holes. For a moment she thought she had been mistaken. She was looking into an empty front door, with a door leading to an inner room beyond. The door stood half open. Then she saw what caught her eye. A foot extended from behind the doorpost, and was moving up and down, as if somebody in the back room were lying on the floor doing keep-fit exercises. Greatly startled, anxious, but unhesitating, Erebus pushed open the front door and went quietly in. Hawk, with a harsh croak of disapproval, let go of her hair and went to sit on a little spindly ash tree 100 yards off. "Owen," Erebus said in a low voice, and then a little louder, "is anyone by here?" No answer, but a faint muffled grunt from the next room. Erebus ran through, and what she saw made her eyes go round as saucers. "Owen!" she whispered on an indrawn breath. "Atros, Dybrid, who have done this to you, boy?" Owen's right hand had been tied to his left foot, and his right foot to his left hand. The ropes fastening them together had been placed over the hen-roost beam that crossed the room at knee-height, so that he hung suspended from it. He could have rested, if he chose, on the straw heap which was piled under the beam at one point, but he had preferred to work his way along to the door, so that by dragging the upper part of his body painfully half over the beam, he might be able to make the faint, desperate signal with one foot. A thick cloth was tied over his mouth, which was stuffed with hay. "Wait you a little half-minute, and I will have those things off you," said Erebus through her teeth, and with shaking hands she pulled out the small knife that she carried, always for cutting witch hazel and wild licorice. In a minute she had the cords cut, and lowered Owen gently to the floor. He made an inarticulate sound beneath the gag and rolled his eyes toward the roof warningly. "Easy then, boy," she sobbed through the cloth and flung it in a corner. Owen spat out the dusty hay that had been half choking him. "Danger!" she croaked. "Mustn't stay here, Erebus. House may be buried any minute. Hoot, boy, will I be leaving without you? Stir your old stumps and come along with you, then." It took Owen 3 tries before he could stand upright. So numb from lack of blood were his hands and feet, but at last he managed it, leaning on Erebus, and staggered out of the house. "Best leave me now, Erebus," he muttered. "If those men came back, if they caught you—" "What men? No, never mind for now. Leave you? Fiflorg! As if I should do such a thing. But where can I take you that is not too far?" she muttered, her brows creased. She could see that he was feverish. Plainly, it was out of the question that he should walk a mile uphill, right through town and back to the Dando's cavern. Besides, whoever it was that had tied him up so brutally could be that strange man with the mustaches. Could that strange man with the mustaches have something to do with it? Might come back, or be in town and see them go by. "I have it!" she exclaimed at length. "I will take you to Brother Ianto. Do you think you can walk a quarter of a mile, Owen Bach?" He nodded faintly. She tucked her arm through his and led him up the gorge, away from the dangerous overhang, to a point where the cliffs on either side of the track were sheer vertical rock. "Only a few more steps now. Carried,
there's brave you have been. Wait you now by here while I call the good brother."
Owen, dizzily and only half conscious, was not particularly surprised when she disappeared into a cleft in the rock. Hawk, who had been flapping along uneasily behind them, planted down and settled with a croak on Owen's shoulder. In a moment Erebus was back with a small, brown, wizened man in a monk's habit, who took one look at Owen and remarked, "Bed him. Fit of fever there is on him, nothing much. Come you this way, my